You are listening to The Overwhelmed Brain. Today's episode is brought to you by GetOutOfTheMess.com. Are you annoyed by affirmations? Are you tired of that same old, rehashed personal growth advice that all seems to boil down to, think positively and all your problems will go away? If affirmations feel like lies and positive thinking feels like denial, then I want you to get ready. The Overwhelmed Brain is here to help you create the life you want now. Hello, and welcome to The Overwhelmed Brain. I am your host, personal empowerment coach, Paul Coliani, and I am here to help you increase your emotional intelligence, strengthen your self-worth and self-esteem, and empower you so that you can make decisions that are right for you. Everything I talk about on this show is my personal opinion and is meant for informational and educational purposes only. You know I have to say that. Always consult your physician or therapist or counselor before making any changes to your medical treatment. All right, we're going to get into what I'm going to probably define as a very hard question. The reason it's hard is because it has to do with dealing with people from different nationalities, different cultures, and what do you do when your job relies on working with people with all these different cultures and varieties, and you're never working with the same team. That's what this email is about. I'm just going to read it to you. It's really quick. This is from somebody who reached out to me from Dubai. So I think calling him Bill would be inappropriate, but I don't know what would be appropriate. And this brings up the first dilemma, doesn't it? Where typically I'll call someone just some generic American name like Paul. I know his real name, but I'm not going to say it here because I didn't get permission to use it. But I will say this. This is relevant to what he's talking about. So let me just read the letter. It says, "Hello, Paul. I'm following your podcast regularly, and it has been helpful in my day-to-day activities. I'm a senior in a crew, and the challenge I face every day is to work with different people that I don't know, but I have to lead in order for the job to go smoothly and the customers that we serve to have a good experience. My team is always multicultural, and it doesn't always go smoothly. It'll be great if you can talk about working with a multicultural team that keeps changing, because when you work with a stable team, you can get to know how they behave and why they do it. They get to know you as well. But when the team keeps changing, that's when it can be really challenging." All right, great question. And let's dive right into it. I don't have a name for you because this is one of the challenges, isn't it? I could call you Bill, but what if you were offended by that? I could call you Sam. I could call you Charlie. I could call you Muhammad, but what if that offended you? So this is something I'm learning right now in real time, is that there is a way that I do my show that could essentially offend someone of another culture, of another nationality, of another origin, of another status, who knows? And I think it's important that one of the first things that comes up for me is that I do a little bit more sociological and anthropological research. That is the study of culture. That is the study of how we interact socially and how other people perceive the world, how other people's emotions are sometimes regulated by the society or the culture that they're in. And I may be wrong in some of what I'm saying here, but it goes to show you that I'm a little bit ignorant in this area. So this is a hard question for me. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have anything for you. I want to say Bill. I have something for you, but I'm just prefacing it with the idea that it is very difficult, especially when you are working with new people all the time and they're from a variety of different backgrounds. So I feel your pain. Even now, I feel your pain because I'm not sure what is socially acceptable to you. But you're not in front of me. I can't ask you any questions. I just have to make assumptions, which I'm sure you often do. However, you do have the advantage of interacting. And there are many ways, or at least there are a few important ways to interact that will help you connect with people and not be offensive, or they not offend you because of some sort of cultural norm that they're used to, that you're used to. So it's important to understand this stuff when you're working with a variety of people. I mean, this is all about social studies, which I paid no attention to in school, which is kind of an admittance here, because that is about cultures and society and political science, social science, humanity, and history. And as soon as they started talking about history, I glossed over. I couldn't pay attention. So social studies was like one of those classes I wasn't looking forward to. Now I'm all about it. Now I love learning about it, but I don't have the background in it that gives me all the qualifications. So let me just tell you that before I give you these answers. It doesn't mean my answers aren't going to be helpful. It just means that there are probably better sources for this, which leads me to my first point. I would highly recommend that you study the cultures that you're around the most. Look up emotions in different cultures. I looked that up on Google, and I found some very interesting stuff. I mean, I've studied the work of Dr. Paul Ekman, that, he studies the micro-expressions of the emotions of people and has found like 6 or 7 very common emotions that we all express through our face. And when we smile, and there's like happiness and sadness and some other generic ones that we all experience. So these types of commonalities are good to know when you're working with other people. If you know that when I give you a genuine smile, that I am probably conveying some sort of positive emotion inside of me. If someone else gives you a genuine smile, then you returning that smile can create a small bond maybe, or a bit of rapport that might be important when you're working together. So it's good to study the emotions and the mannerisms of other cultures so that you understand that when you work with someone of a certain culture, that you at least have a basic guideline, instead of not knowing anything and just making guesses about what might be acceptable, what might not be. Now, I'm also making some assumptions from your letter that the difficulties do have to do with these cultural differences, and that you might be violating one of their cultural rules, one of their long-standing traditions in their culture that you say something about and suddenly you've offended someone. I'm assuming that that's what might happen here. I'm also assuming that some cultures approach things differently. Like I was reading an article on anthropology, another great thing to study and if you want to learn about how humans communicate and interact and what we're all about. And the article gets into how the types of conversations that you would have with, for example, a cashier would be a lot different than the types of conversations you would have with a friend. And the article pointed out, it was funny, it said, what if you were in line and the cashier said, "So, how's your sex life?" It would be a little odd. It would be awkward. You'd be like, I don't even know this person, assuming you didn't know the cashier. I don't even know this person, and they're asking about my sex life. But imagine if they came from an upbringing, a family, a culture that was open about that, what talked about it, was celebrated. I don't know exactly what culture that is. Like I said, I'm not the expert here, but so that's why some people can be surprising to us and say things that are out of societal and social norms. And we go, what? That person's so rude. Yet to them, it's normal. Just like when I got into this relationship with my girlfriend, she says things in a way that might be considered passive aggressive. But I don't really think they're intentional when, after I met her family, I know where it came from. And the passive aggressiveness was sort of like a dig into how they showed each other love. I'm telling you, it's a strange combination, but this happens. And these little digs they gave to each other, I'm just going to take a wild guess, might be, I don't know, because they're uncomfortable showing love, so they say it in a different way. That's a total guess. I might be completely wrong, but and I haven't studied her family or anything like that, but it gives me an idea of how different families, different people show different emotional responses and say different things than I might say. And so anything different than I might say is just something that may or may not be acceptable to me, but perfectly acceptable to them, and they may not even know they're offending me. So that's kind of the backdrop of what I'm talking about, and what you're referring to in your letter is that we just don't know. And especially when your team keeps changing and you have different people from different cultures, what do you do then? So, like I said, the very first thing I think is that, take note of the culture that these people are from and start doing some of your own studies on anthropology and cultures and sociology and learn a bit about each culture. And it's a huge field of study. It takes years and years and years to learn about human behavior. I'm still learning about human behavior. I deal mostly with singles and couples. One person is complex enough. When you get two people in a relationship, that is like the cockpit of a space shuttle. It can be so complex. Even though there are simple rules to follow, we as really intense thinkers on the planet, trying to make everything work out and thinking that we're doing the right thing, or trying to finagle things so that they work out so that we stay a couple, or so that our partner falls in line, so that this, so that that. We're always trying to finagle things, I think, or a lot of times. Just a single relationship with two people can be very complex, as you probably know. So when it comes to a whole team and you have all these different brains in the room, so you're in a very challenging situation. So yes, step one, study some cultures so that you can get an idea of their upbringing. You're not going to be right all the time. Just because he's Chinese or she's Indian doesn't mean he was brought up with traditional Chinese culture, and doesn't mean she was brought up with traditional Indian culture. You might be wrong about that, but this is why we're talking about it. The next thing to do is build rapport. And there are many ways to do it. You can read all the generic ways, like look them in the eye, and if he likes golf, you talk about golf. A lot of generic things you can do there. But I like to use what I learned in NLP and psychology and other things that I've studied over the years, hypnosis, building rapport in a sense of observing their external behavior, their facial expressions, the speed at which they talk, the tone at which they talk. Is it very up and down, like, hey, how you doing? It's great to see you. Or is it, hi, how you doing? It's great to see you. More monotone. You listen for that stuff. You be hyper observant of their reactions to your behavior. You look at their gestures. What do they do with their hands? Are they fidgety? Are they stationary? Are they always looking around, or are they just kind of more relaxed, and when they talk, they don't move too much? All of these things you notice and take note, because what you can do is sort of match what they're doing. This is just a deeper level rapport building exercise. Is if they're using their hands a lot and you're not used to doing that, then you start to use your hands a little bit more. You don't mimic them completely, but you do it in a way that shows them that, hey, I like you and I would like to be like you. That's not the message necessarily that I'm giving you, but I think it's a good idea that when you're with many people and you need to get along, that you find ways that make each other comfortable. If someone came up to me and started talking like I did and started making similar gestures that I did, I would feel more comfortable with that person. And now I wouldn't know if they were doing it in a contrived way. I wouldn't know if they were trying to mimic me. I think if they were trying to mimic me and exaggerating it, I would be like, what are you doing? I could tell what you're doing. But the more natural you make it, the less aware they'll be. And I tell you what, every time I've done something like that, where I've done similar gestures and behavior and rate of speech, the way I talk like other people, it's never noticed. It's not that I need to do it all the time. I might have to pull that tool out every now and then just to use it, but it is good to have in your toolbox. So, for example, when someone from the South comes up and starts saying, hey, how you doing? and they're talking to me, I go, hey, how's it going? I automatically feel like I'm in their space, like there's a welcoming presence in there. So I like to step into that welcoming presence and be like them. Now, what does this mean? Does that mean I can't be authentically me? Does this mean that I'm being deceiving or I'm trying to, pull one over on them? No, I just want to connect. I don't mind connecting in that way. In fact, when I try it on, hey, how you doing? It feels pretty good. I just try it on and see what it feels like. And again, it's not a tool that I have to pull out every time, but sometimes you'll meet someone and they're like a fast talker, and you're a slow talker, and suddenly you have a hard time communicating because they're going, hey, did you see this thing? I'm going to show it to you right now. And you're like, oh, whoa, okay, I'm just trying to figure out where you are, what you're doing. So there might be some differences there and you can't seem to connect. So wouldn't it be great if you both could meet in the middle, which doesn't normally happen? It usually takes one person to step in there and go, hey, I'm going to talk a little faster and see if I can keep up with this guy. I might have to, engage my brain a little bit more to keep up with this person. That might be a step you take. I don't know. So all of these things are a way to build rapport and to connect and just be in their space with them. Because it feels more comfortable when someone's actually making an attempt to be in your space with you. Otherwise, you feel like they're just there filling the void of whatever space they're in and just trying to get to the next phase of their life, which may be true. But if you have to work with these people, like this letter writer said, he is the senior to these people, then it would be great to get along so that if he has to administer, supervise, manage, whatever, that there is some level of likability in there. So there's no like resentment building and things like that. So there's another thing that you can look at. The third thing I would say is ask questions. This is part of maybe building rapport, but it's also learning about them more. For example, just a simple question like, how do you prefer to be addressed? Like, let's just say that John Smith Jr. came to work with you. You might want to ask, do you like to be called John Jr.? Do you like to be called John? And that would give you an opportunity to learn how they like to be addressed. And it also shows them that you're willing to accept their reality, their model of the world. And because of that, then it shows that you're willing to work with them instead of create a I'm right, you're wrong scenario. That's a little stretch, but you get what I mean. Like, hey, how do you like to be addressed? Is it this? Is it that? You could say, where are you from? Where do you call home? And if the person goes, I call home China, then because of your study of Chinese culture, you might actually have something to talk about. And you might also have a way to approach them that feels better to them. And if you plan on staying in a job that continues to have this repeated, I don't know if it's turnover or if you're just meeting different teams from different places, if you want to continue this kind of job, then it would be great to know these cultures, at least at a basic level. So you have some understanding so that you don't unintentionally create a cultural divide in your team. And as a senior, that's really good for you to be that person that knows these cultures so that you can also solve maybe differences among the team, not just between you and the team, but the individuals in the team with each other. Another thing you can do is express what you believe they're experiencing. And what I mean by that is, let's just say that you told one of them, hey, can you go over there and get me that chair? And they give you kind of a look that looks like anger. But they go, oh, of course, yeah, I'll get it, no problem. So they tell you one thing, and it sounds like they're being accommodating and supportive, but you saw the look of anger. And so what you do is, you don't listen necessarily to what they're saying, although that's very important too, but you can express like, oh, it looks like what I just said upset you, and then wait for their response. And it should elicit another response from them that shows that you can see that your behavior might have upset them. I mean, this can be with anything. If you notice what I call an incongruence, like their facial expression doesn't match what they're saying, it's very helpful for you to know this so that you can take note of what you think might be going on. It's a little bit of mind reading, but if you see an emotion on their face and you hear something different, you'll get that, I don't know, you could call it cognitive dissonance, I guess. You'll get this feeling like there's just something not right. Or I saw the anger or upset in their face, yet they smiled right away and said, okay, no problem. So I want you to be observant of this. This whole process requires you to be very external, outside yourself, not internalizing things, not making it about you, but just being aware of other people's behavior and observant so that you can tell, and you get better at it. You can tell what's going on. Again, you're almost mind reading, but it can be helpful so that you know how to approach people, and you also give yourself a chance to justify or not that what you're mind reading is true or not. So if you say, hey, it looks like what I just said upset you, and you wait for the response, you'll find out, oh, no. They'll probably say, no, it didn't upset me. But at least it gives them an opportunity to express what's going on. If they don't choose to express what's really going on, then, that's their issue. They either can come to you and say, it did upset me what you said. And then you can have a good conversation about it. Or it could turn into something else. I don't know. But the idea is that this is helpful to strengthen your observation skills. And as a coach, I do this all the time. I listen to my clients' inflection in their voice. And if we're face-to-face, I watch for their expressions to find out where they are inside. Like when I'm walking somebody through something and I can see them, looking quizzical. And then they said, no, I got it. And then I go, well, are you sure you got it? And then they might go, well, I'm stuck on one thing. Whereas I could have just said, oh, they said they're sure, so I'll just move on. I don't have to worry about it. And their expressions said otherwise. So there's two more things that I have for you. One of them is, as the senior in the crew, there's a certain expectation that you'll have about the juniors or your subordinate, if that's what they are. If you're there to supervise or manage, and there are certain expectations that those under you will have for you. So the question is, do you play the role of senior? Are you that supervisor? Are you that manager? Because sometimes it's helpful to just be the role instead of the person, or be more of the role and the person. What I mean by that is, like when I worked at an alarm company in the early 90s, I kept getting raises and promotions, and I got to a position of assistant manager for this entire department. And even though I was still Paul, I was still that guy that people can talk to, I still showed up as the assistant manager. And when it came down to it, if it was an important decision I needed to make it as the role I was playing as assistant manager. And sometimes feelings got hurt. If I made the decision as the person, Paul, then I would certainly spare a lot of feelings, but I may not get the job done. Now, this is a gray area. I've come to a place where I make more personal decisions now than business decisions. And if my business decisions are hurtful to others, then I don't make them. So I'm in a different space with that. But sometimes when you're dealing with teams, when you're dealing with systems and companies and corporate structure and all that, that if you don't show up in the role at all and you're always that person, then things might start to fall apart. And what I mean by that is that I've seen supervisors in a role that had a really hard time playing that supervisor. And this is relevant to the conversation that Scott Barlow and I had at Happen to Your Career, the very last episode where he came on the air and we talked about career and changing careers and such. He said that not everyone is born a leader. And so people end up in these leadership roles and these supervisory roles, and they have to figure it out. They don't know exactly what to do or how to do it. And so a lot of their personality will come into play, which is fine, but not when it's a detriment to the role. So like I said, this is a gray area. I would prefer that a person be in a role and does a role instead of the role being what the person's all about. hard to explain, but if the person is kind and submissive and he gets into a supervisory role and he or she has to make decisions that, may hurt some feelings, but it's best for the company overall, then that's what might need to happen. There's more responsibility. There's more chance to hurt people's feelings. There's all kinds of things that happen as you move up the ladder. So if you're in this senior role, as this letter writer is saying, you may need to play that role sometimes because, and this is why I'm saying it, because most cultures, if not all, understand hierarchy. And that's good to know, is that if there's a hierarchy, most cultures understand it. And if you're not playing that hierarchy, I mean, if you're allowed to, I'm not sure what senior means for you. It might just mean that you're there the longest. But if you have authority and there is trouble brewing in the team, you might have to play that role of authority in order to keep the team coordinated or organized and getting along. So I don't know what your role is there, and I don't know how much authority you do have, but it's good to know anyway that it's okay to step into that authority role and say, no, this is the way it needs to be done. And some people may not like it, and you may hurt feelings. It just might be the way it has to be. And the final thing I want to say about this is that is something I already mentioned, but not in this way. Be aware of your own facial expressions because they're conveying the most important message. This is that congruence thing again. If you show anger in your face because you're angry, but you come across as nice and you say something nice, oh, no, I'm fine. You may create conflict without even trying. This is another step into being very self-aware, very externally observant, even of yourself, because your face gives away a lot. And this is what Dr. Paul Ekman talks about in micro-expressions, and he has examples on his website. You'll see people making little facial expressions, but then saying something that doesn't match that facial expression. That's good to know inside yourself. It's good to know what you're feeling inside and what you're conveying on the outside. And if you are not congruent in that, you feel differently than you're expressing, it comes across. And it's good to be aware that maybe you need to address that stuff inside of you, or bring it out, or express it, or just be aware that your face is conveying the real message. So if that's the case, you may have to work on your facial expressions. That sounds a little deceiving again. Sounds like you're trying to manipulate the outcome here. But the bottom line is when you're working with all these different people and different societies and different cultures, and you just want to make it through the day because you'll never see them again, you may have to step into this different space for a little bit with certain people. If you're angry at someone and you know that if you convey your anger to them, it's just going to make your day worse, or the team's going to suffer for it, you may have to practice not looking angry. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for writing that letter. Very difficult question, but I hope I helped you maybe get to a better space, maybe some things you can try and see if things work out. Thanks so much again. We'll be right back. Today's show is brought to you by GetOutOfTheMess.com, and what that is your connection to a legal service. What Asha, who is an independent associate for Legal Shield, will tell you is a service that you can rely on and make phone calls to and ask questions to a law firm. I mean, if you go to a law firm right now, you're going to spend probably, $250 to $350 per hour. But if you use this service, you're going to spend, I think it's around $20 a month. I mean, it might vary between $18 and $24, depending on single or family plan and things like that. Asha likes to call it legal insurance, and I think that's a great name because when something happens, you want to get out of the mess. So how do I get out of the mess? Well, I don't know. Let me call this number. And you call your attorney. It's a law firm that's assigned to you in the state or province you're in. It's in the U.S. or Canada. So If you're interested in this kind of service, instead of paying for an hour, you get a whole year for what you'd pay for an hour if you just walked into a law firm and asked for assistance. Check it out. Go to getoutofthemess.com or call Asha at 678-355-8777. She can tell you if you need this service or not, if it's going to work for you or not, and if you like it, then she'll connect you with it. That's all it is. 678-355-8777. Getoutofthemess.com. Welcome back. I thought the last email was difficult. This one, probably just as difficult, if not more, but we're going to tackle it anyway. Let's see where we get. This person I'm going to call Mary. Mary says, I'm in my 50s. I've been married for a few years. I left my former long-term marriage to be with my current husband. I moved away to live with him in another state, hundreds of miles from my now grown children and friends. As time goes on, I find that I'm no longer happy living this life, just being his wife. I miss my role as parent, even to grown children. I miss my friends, and I feel as I no longer have a full life. I'm depressed, and our marriage is suffering. He doesn't initiate physical affection anymore. I know this happens in a marriage. He claims it's not intentional, that he's focused on other things, and he's sorry. He says he loves me, and I still do love him. I feel that if I had a more fulfilling life, and I had my old life back, these things would not make me feel as depressed, and I wouldn't feel as if I had so much invested in him. My former marriage was far from perfect. However, I find myself longing for that life again. Things were simpler. Moving back home with my current husband to be closer to my family is not an option right now due to finances. Complicating matters is my husband's health, both physical and mental. He recently had a very long bipolar manic phase, which resulted in our lives being very disrupted. We no longer eat together, go to bed together, watch TV together, or do anything we used to enjoy. He says he wants that back, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm feeling very despondent and maybe a little regretful. I knew he had bipolar, and I thought I was prepared for the inevitable ups and downs, but I'm not happy with our current situation. His physical health does not allow him to do things with me that I like to do, such as walking, bicycling, etc. He has given up driving as well. I know from therapy that I have a habit of running away from problems. I did that in the first place with my first husband. I cheated on him during our marriage. The guilt I feel is eating me alive. I feel guilty for abandoning my family, and now I feel guilty for feeling unhappy in the current marriage. Do you have any sage words of wisdom for me? Mary, thank you so much for sharing that. Like I said, this is a very, very difficult situation because now you're in a marriage that where your husband has fallen ill, there's something going on there, and you're far from home, so you have no family support structure of any sort, it looks like. And you're maybe regretting decisions that you made to be where you are. And on top of that, you don't have the finances to move closer. Although it does sound like if you did, it sounds like your husband would make that decision. So there is a speckle, a little splinter of light that comes out of that, which means, what are you doing to save money to move? That would be my first, the big picture comment suggestion here is that what can you do to save money to move? What can you do to move? And if finances are tight, are you, and I'm just going to be practical here, are you renting? Do you own a home? Do you have stuff you can sell? Can you sell your house? Would you be willing to sell it all to move back? I don't know what your situation is, but I do want you to consider what you'd be willing to do to move back. Because let's just say that it's only finances that keeps you from moving back. Let's just talk about one little aspect of your email here. If it's only finances, then have you gone through every single way to create a little bit more income so that you can move back? Like you implied in your email, your husband seems to be okay that if you had the money, you'd move back. And if that's the case, then it might be interesting to do some budget work here and find out what it would take to move back and what it would take to live somewhere else. And if you own a house now, how much can you get for it, and so on and so forth. But those are big decisions. I realize that. I realize that it's hard to just sell everything and move. I've done it, but I understand it can be very hard. But, what is the long-term result of that? Well, if we move, then we have to rent a place, and I don't want to rent for the rest of my life. And then I would say, yeah, but you'd be with family. Would that make you happy? And you might go, oh my God, yes, it would make me very happy. So if you rent, would that be too much? You wouldn't be able to handle the rent, or would family make you happy? And so that's where you're going to be. That decision is certainly a personal one. I'm not going to tell you what to do there, but I do want you to consider what you're willing to give up in order to be closer to a support structure that makes you happy. Because it's not like you said, your therapist says you have a tendency to run away from problems. Let's just talk about that. It's not like you're running away from a problem if you move back. It's like you're running toward a solution. Now, I'm really reaching there. I could be wrong, but I don't see it as running away from a problem unless you're talking about leaving the marriage, which we can talk about, of course. If you're talking about leaving the marriage and running home toward family to be with them, then, that could be considered running away from a problem. However, what can you do to resolve what's going on in your marriage? Let's talk about that. Because right now you have a husband that says he wants to get his old life back and, wants to be intimate, I guess, and says it's not intentional and that he's focused on other things and he's sorry. However, what is he doing? I'm going to put him on the spot here, and it's very unfair. I don't have his side, and I might be overstepping a little bit here because, somebody might be listening and going, you don't know what it's like to be bipolar manic. And you're right. I don't know that particular condition in me. I have not experienced that. But I will say this, when he's not being bipolar, when he's not in a manic state, like you said, he was that way for a while, when he's not in something so debilitating, then what is he doing? Is he just watching TV? What is he doing? Because I look at something like this and go, okay, someone who's really committed, who really wants things to change, will do so. They will move mountains to make it happen. I mean, if you want to test this, look at a couple who gets divorced and they both want custody of the kid. And then one of them moves 100 miles away and the other one misses their kid so bad. What do you think they're going to do to get custody or at least get closer to their kid? They're going to bring up lawsuits. They're going to move. They're going to, make it hard for the other parent to keep their kid away from them. This might be a bad example, but I can tell you what, a desperate, determined parent moves mountains. They do whatever it takes to make it happen. So I see this in relationships where one of the two people, one partner, wants to change, wants to make things happen, but does nothing. He or she talks about all the changes they want to make and how they wish it would be different, yet there's no action. There's nothing happening. But they want it, but nothing's going on. And, again, like I said, I might be reaching here, and he may be in such a condition that he is simply in the state that he doesn't have the energy or the willpower to do it. I don't know. But on his off hours, when he is calm and relaxed, what is he doing to make things better? Is he doing any type of self-help? Is he doing any type of healing? Is he meditating? Is he changing his ways? I don't know. So like I said, it might be unfair for me to talk about him and what position he's in. But when I see someone who says they want to do something and doesn't do anything, then I look at that as what it will be for the rest of our time together. That's important to know. It's important for you to know. If he says he's going to do something and he never does it, that's important for you to know. And what does that mean? Does that mean if you decide, and I'm just talking here, this isn't a suggestion, I'm just saying things, If you decide to leave the marriage, are you really running away from your problem, or are you running away from a problem that you have no control over? So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And I'm not saying that it's time to leave the marriage, because there's so many other options that come into play here. Therapy, going to relationship classes. If you go to church, there are sometimes free resources you can get for therapy and things like that, or other support groups in that area. Reading books together, doing date night together, different things like that. But if he has gotten to a point where he is losing interest in the marriage or losing interest in life, I don't know, then something needs to be done. Something needs to happen. And if he's choosing to not make it happen, then, you definitely need to discuss this. That would be my question. Why aren't you doing anything? I thought you wanted something to happen. Because, but it takes a lot of work or a lot of energy, or I haven't found the right person, or if I haven't hit this or I haven't done that, then all of these excuses will be what keeps him stagnant, what keeps you both stagnant. And it takes two. It takes two to get through this stuff. And if you're willing to do the work and he's not, then he's not willing to help you solve this problem. So this isn't necessarily your problem alone, it's both of yours. And if one person is not willing to help resolve the problem, then you won't be able to change anything. I don't mean to make that sound defeating and make you upset about this, but I need you to come to some acceptances of what will be and what won't be. If he is unwilling to change, then you have to accept that that's what is going to happen. That is going to be the way it is. Now, on top of that, if you are starting to feel bad, like guilty, because he is ill and he is getting worse, then he probably definitely needs some sort of help, some sort of guidance, something. And I would, start to look right away, how can we help this person? If he's refusing help, now you have more power for you. If someone refuses to get well in the relationship and the relationship is suffering because of it, then you have to take your power back. You have to bring it back in you and go, you know what? I'm going to help you. I want you to help me help this relationship. But if you're not going to do it, then I need to help me help myself. I think I said that right. I need to help myself. I need to reserve my energy for me so that I can do something for me. Because if you're not willing to go this route with me, I can't go down with you. If the ship is sinking and he's the captain, he may want to go down with it. I don't know. But why should the crew have to go down with it? Now, that's a terrible analogy, because I don't mean to say that you're not the captain, you're not the equal in this relationship. It's just a matter of how is a relationship defined is defined by the most dominant aspect of that relationship sometimes. It's like a computer analogy where your computer is only as fast as the slowest component. When I heard that, I had to go, what does that mean? And it turns out that if you have a really fast computer, but you have a really slow hard drive, then the time it takes to write to the hard drive and read from the hard drive slows down your entire system. It's like putting a Yugo engine into a Lamborghini. Your Lamborghini is not going to go fast with a 3-cylinder engine. So it's the same thing in a marriage. Your marriage will only be as healthy as its unhealthiest component. Now, with people, it's a lot different. There's a lot of variables, a lot of ways to look at it. But if you have someone that has a dominant, unhealthy component, and the marriage is falling ever so downward because of that unhealthy component, then you have to start preserving yourself and reserving your energy so that you can do what you need to do for you if the unhealthy component is in the other person. And this is a really tough area for me to give you any suggestions about, because there are times when you get with someone and you commit to them, and now they get ill, they get sick, or they become debilitated in some way or handicapped in some way. And now you're thinking, geez, this isn't what I signed up for. I want to get out of this. So I realize there's a bit of this in here, or a lot of this in here. So it's a difficult thing to address. But you also have to understand that if you're not getting a conscious participant to help you solve these relationship issues, nothing to do with his condition or his illness, but just a conscious physical action-oriented effort for him to do something instead of just talk about it. If you're not getting that, then you are truly alone. And being alone, this is why, I'm going to assume you're getting depressed. If you're alone and you don't have your support from your husband to help the relationship get better, then the ship is sinking and you don't want to be on it. Jumping off a sinking ship is not running away from your problems. It's self-preserving. So I don't want you to see any decision that you make as running away from your problems. Yes, if you have problems, you do everything you can until you're exhausted to try to fix those problems. But if you've reached a stalemate and there's nowhere to go and you can't go any further with it, and you've tried and tried and tried, yet the ship keeps sinking, yet it gets worse and worse and worse, and there's nothing more you can do, it's time to refocus that energy onto yourself and preserve what you have left and rebuild what you have left in you so that you can make the right decisions for you, so that you can take a path that works for you, that gives you the results that are going to be the healthiest for you. Again, this is because the other person doesn't seem to want to resolve the problems, doesn't seem to want to tackle the challenges. Maybe it's overwhelming for him. It might be. Maybe there's so much going on in his life that he doesn't have the energy to tackle anything. But sometimes you're climbing the mountain and you're carrying 200 pounds of gear and you know you can't make it to the top, but you also realize if I don't make it to the top, where my base camp is, for example, then I won't survive. So I'm going to take the next step. It reminds me, a few months after my back started healing, after my back surgery, I had some sciatic nerve issue. And I was married, and my wife wanted to get a treadmill. And I was like, a treadmill? Are you crazy? The reason I said that is because we lived up 4 flights of stairs. And I could not imagine getting a treadmill up these stairs. I couldn't imagine it. So she's like, but I want one. I'm like, are you even going to use it? It's kind of a jerk. And I said, this is going to turn into a clothesline. We're going to just hang wet clothes on it. I'm thinking all this stuff. But I said, you know what? If you say you're going to use it, great. I support that. And I said, okay, let's do it. So I looked for a treadmill online and I found one. Everyone's always getting rid of their treadmills. It's very easy to find treadmills. But I found one. He was getting rid of it. I went with my wife to this person's garage. We plugged it in. Everything worked. I think we gave him $100, and I said, okay, we'll take it. We put it in the back of, what do we have? I think her SUV. Put it in the back of her SUV, barely fit. And then we finally got it home. And the thing, I'm not kidding, it weighed so much that both of us could not lift it. I mean, we could get it off the ground a few inches, but we just could not lift it. So we back it up to the bottom stair, and I'm looking at the stairs going, there's just no way. There's just no way we're going to get up these stairs. And I said, well, let's do this. If we can get it up the first stair, we can go all the way. And she liked that idea. I'm like, okay, there's our incentive. If we can get up the first stair, we can go all the way. If we can't, we're going to have to do something else. So we got it out of the SUV, stood it up on its end, like it was vertical, and we kind of inched it over to the stair. And we're like, okay, 1, 2, 3, lift. And we got it up. And it was like, we did it. We made it on the first step. It was hard, but we did it. And then looking up the stairs, I said, okay, we made it up the first step. Let's do the second one. 1, 2, 3, lift. 1, 2, 3, lift. We made it up the first flight, the second flight. And, at the second flight, there's a landing. So we're sitting there exhausted. Somebody walks by and they see what we're doing and definitely didn't offer to help. They saw what we were doing and probably thought, I don't want anything to do with this. And they kept walking, which I thought was funny. But I understood it. But we were looking up the next 2 flights going, oh, here we go again. But in the end, we got it up there. It was do or die, because after you get to the halfway point, do or die. You just have to do it. Otherwise, the treadmill is going to stay outside, and what are we going to do with it? We didn't even know anyone. We were in Oregon at the time. We didn't have any friends in Oregon. So we weren't sure what we were going to do. We might have had to have put an ad on Craigslist or something. But, it rains in Oregon, and if it stays outside, it could ruin the treadmill. So there we were, halfway. We have to go up the rest. And we made it. I look at that scenario, and that's how I see a relationship, that no matter how much weight you're carrying up the mountain, if you have a problem in your life, if your husband has this problem, and it's just too hard to continue, then he either needs to get help, or he has to take that next step, that really difficult next step to help the relationship out. It shows that he's willing to, even at the point of exhaustion, at least try harder. So if he's not in that space, and he may not be, then the relationship probably won't go anywhere. And knowing that, you have an understanding of what your relationship is, where it's going, and who your support is. If he is not supporting, then again, you feel alone. So what are my words of wisdom for you? I would say this. If you haven't gotten anything from what I just said, because I'm not going to give you a direct suggestion to do anything, because I don't know your situation so well that I can do that, I will say this. It is very important that if your husband is not taking the steps he needs to get better in himself or improve the relationship at all, because he's in a place where he needs some more help, he needs guidance, he needs to work on himself somehow, then it's very important that you start doing the things that you like to do. You're walking, you're bicycling, all of those things, just to start refilling yourself. I mean, this is if you plan on staying in the relationship. If you plan on staying, then you have to come to some very difficult acceptances of what it is. If you can accept that he is who he is and nothing will change, or things will get worse, then you can invest in yourself. You can take trips to see your kids, or your kids can take trips to see you, or maybe they can pay for trips for you to come see them. That might be an alternative that you can take and do something with. That may be something that helps for the time being until you know exactly what you want in your life. So you may have to accept the way things are for now, which may not be easy. Or you take the underlying message of what I just said and do something about it. Like I said, this is very tough. I wouldn't want to be in your situation, because here you are, and if that person's not supporting himself, let alone the relationship or you, then all you have is yourself. So this is where self-preservation comes into play, and you may need to make decisions without him. Again, I'm not saying that that's what you do, and if this sounds at all insensitive to his plight, I am also giving him an opportunity to seek help himself. Because if he's not doing any of this stuff, if he's not doing anything and he's only saying things, then he's not going to do anything. I mean, that might be the acceptance that you have to come to. He will never do anything to get to a better place in himself. Now, as far as your guilt, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, you said that the guilt is eating you alive. I want you to listen to my episodes on guilt if you haven't done so already, because guilt is one of those things that never goes away until you address it head on. And, I can put the pieces together and say the reason you feel guilty is because you cheated on your first husband in your first marriage, and now leaving your second husband will be along the same lines of some sort of betrayal or something. So all I have to say about that is you're looking at 2 different scenarios. The first one, maybe it was running away from your problems. The first marriage, you cheated. All right, come to terms with that. I cheated. And whatever else comes to mind, and I'm not saying what I'm about to say is true. I'm just saying whatever comes to mind. I was a liar. I was a bitch. I was this. I was a betraying, lying SOB, or whatever words come to you. Whatever words come, just own everything that comes to mind. Don't try to avoid it. I was all those things, because maybe you felt that you were. But right now, you're not. I'm assuming you're not that person anymore. Right now, you have a different scenario unfolding. You have someone that is closing off and becoming more and more isolated from you in the relationship, and that is not anything you can control. In your last marriage, yes, you had control. Yes, you made the decision to do something that you feel bad about now. Okay, listen to my episodes on guilt and get past it really fast. And don't apply that guilt to what's going on today. That guilt is a different scenario, a different unfolding of events. This is a different thing altogether. If you choose to leave because of self-preservation, it's a lot different than staying in a relationship and betraying the trust of the person you're with. Two entirely different scenarios. So don't carry that guilt into this situation. You do have something to heal with the guilt from before, but I need you to forgive yourself for that, because that's not you anymore. I can hear it in your letter. That's not you anymore. That's not what you're doing here. What you're doing here is a lot different. And as far as guilt for abandoning your family, again, the episodes actually help even more here, because guilt can be a huge motivator, a huge incentive to show up for people as you never have in the past, or as you feel like you weren't showing up for them in the past. For example, I felt really guilty about how I treated my younger brother in the past. I should have supported him and got him through the hard times, but no, he became my scapegoat, so I didn't get in trouble. I fed him cat food. I mistreated him in many ways that I'm not proud of, and I felt guilty for many, many years. Well, I'll tell you what, when we rekindled and I went to visit him in Florida, I showed up as the person that was making up for all this guilt I felt. And he saw a brother that he never had before. And it was great. It was great for both of us. And I even told him, I am so sorry for the way I treated you. I am so sorry. And he didn't remember most of it, but it still was lingering inside of me. But just rekindling and making up for that guilt inside of me was a huge relief for me, for our relationship. So this is what I want you to do, is that when you feel guilty for abandoning your family, then not that you really have anything to make up because they're grown children and they can always come and see you, but guilt is a great incentive to just make it up to them in any way you possibly can. Just show up and say, I love you so much, I'm so sorry. Even apologize. And they may go, what are you talking about? You're an adult. You can move away. I mean, we're all adults. It may be guilt that you don't have to hold on to. You probably never did have to hold on to that one. But like I say, guilt is a great motivator, and it will help you show up in a way that will be overly supportive and loving, or however it comes out for you. But you definitely have to be healed from this guilt. You definitely have to move past it. So listen to those episodes. Maybe that'll help. And I hope these, quote, sage words of wisdom helped you. I don't want you to be stuck in something that you feel like it's going to be like this forever and you're going to die alone and depressed. I don't want you to be there. I don't want that for you at all. That's why I presented options to you. They may not be the best options, but I wanted to at least get you to a more empowered place so that you don't have the wrong things holding you back from what you need to do for yourself. I would love to see your relationship flourish and get better and more supportive and more nurturing and loving on both sides. But if only one side is working at it and the other side has all the best intentions in the world, but nothing is happening, then you just have to consider that as you go forward. Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate you. Send me an update sometime. We'll be right back to close the show. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I want to thank Asha with Get Out of the Mess, because she will help you connect to a service that is very helpful. And I like helpful. Call her at 678-355-8777 or go to getoutofthemess.com and learn all about Legal Shield. It's really, really excellent service. I use it myself. And speaking of difficult relationships, I want you to consider getting what I call an assessment and healing guide for relationships for those of you who think you may be in an emotionally abusive or manipulative relationship. It's the MEAN workbook. MEAN stands for Manipulation and Emotional Abuse Number. And the number you get is a 200-point checklist in the workbook that as you go through it, you check off what's happening in your relationship. Now, what this does is really help you articulate what's going on in your relationship, especially if you're unable to define it. Like I had a client once that would tell me, I don't know what he does, but every time we finish a conversation, I just feel guilty, like it was my fault. And he says everything that I did wrong, and every conversation I go into feeling like I'm right, it turns out I'm wrong. And so now I can't trust myself. Now I can't make decisions because I don't have faith in my own decisions. And, working with her and helping her through this and her checking off each thing on the list helped her realize and gain real clarity on exactly what was going on in her relationship. And it wasn't pleasant. She didn't like finding out this stuff, but at the same time, it completely empowered her. It made her realize she wasn't going crazy. And she doesn't have to continue pulling her hair out. She might have to continue pulling her hair out because she has to deal with this person and where they take the next step. But if you often feel guilty, if you're often getting blamed or made to feel responsible for most, if not all, the problems, and if you always feel like you're walking on eggshells around your partner, consider getting this workbook. It's the MEAN workbook. You can go to loveandabuse.com. Yes, that's a website that you haven't heard probably. That goes directly to the MEAN workbook page. It used to be theoverwhelmedbrain.com/MEAN. That's just hard to say. So go to loveandabuse.com and you'll find out all about the MEAN workbook there. And I want to thank members of the Patron program. If you're getting value from this show, I want you to consider going to patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com and join the program. Not only the patron members supporting the show with their monthly financial membership, there are 2 levels they can choose, but they are also getting stuff back, new episodes you haven't heard, and workbooks and videos, and even email coaching. There's 2 programs you can choose in there. One of them is the email coaching program. And a lot of people get value from that. So if you want to support the show, you can go there. Or if you want to get the email coaching or all the episodes you've never heard, go to patron.theoverwhelmedbrain.com. And finally, I'd like to thank Kevin MacLeod with Incompetech.com for some of the music transitions in The Overwhelmed Brain. And to close, I'm just going to tell you this. It's really good to connect with people in person. I've had a couple episodes with Matthew Bivens of the Having It All podcast, and we liked doing that. We got a lot of good feedback from doing that. And there's another one coming, I think, this Wednesday. So if you're listening to this live, January 14th, 2018, then in a few days on Wednesday, you'll hear our next episode where we talk about someone's issue and we go back and forth with it. And I've heard that it's a great format for the show. I'm not replacing the show. I'm just adding this on to the regular Overwhelmed Brain feed to give you more content and also to address all the emails that I get. I get a ton of emails, and it sometimes takes me up to 3 months, sometimes longer, to get to these emails. And some people's problems are already resolved or have gotten worse or haven't changed. And I realize that, and I'm so sorry I can't get to them faster, but I do address every single email I get. And sometimes they pile up, and I do my best. So with these extra episodes, I'm hoping to tackle more of them, and you get someone else's perspective. You get Matthew's perspective. This guy is like super emotional intelligent. I love talking with him. And he's also humble enough to say, you know what? I'm still learning. I'm still learning from you, Paul. I learn a lot from you, and I like working with you. And when I hear that, I'm very humbled. I'm like, wow, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I try to stay in a place where I'm always learning. I don't want to come across as this super guru that's supposed to know everything. Just today, those 2 emails that came in, I'm looking at these going, how the heck am I going to answer these? These are very difficult challenges. So I have to practically meditate on them sometimes. That's kind of my process. I sit with it and I pretend I am that person. Like the first letter writer who has to work with all these people from different cultures. I pretend I'm in that situation doing that every day. So what would I do? And I have a lot of tools at my disposal, so I access those tools. And sometimes I have to create new tools and new ideas and new thought processes. But that's good. That's why I like to get these challenging emails, to put me in that space so that I can generate new resources and not keep them to myself. I share them with you. I want to make sure that you have all the resources you need. And like the second letter, what do you do when you've committed, you've made your promise, and now you're there forever? At least that's what it feels like. You can't change. You're stuck. How do you get out of those situations? I put myself there and I try to figure out what I would do and what's most important and what the real challenge is here. And that's how I come up with some of this stuff and where I go when I give my answers. But what I was saying is that it's great to meet in person because we have so many online friends, don't we? Or at least a lot of us do. We have so many online friends, but it does not replace the personal connection. And when I meet with Matthew, it gives me that sense of personal connection instead of that text message, instead of that Skype call, which is a little bit better. But having that human interaction, just like Mary in our second segment, she feels alone. And it's very difficult sometimes to be in a space where you feel like, there's no one there for you. And much of my work, just about all of it, is a very isolated thing. I don't work with anyone. So to be able to meet with Matthew and get a different perspective and have him jostle my brain a little bit as we go back and forth to find out if there's anything else in there, and I'm jostling his brain and finding out if there's anything more in there, it really pushes you. And that's what I like about human interaction, is that you're not pushed. You're not challenged to your limit with another person when you're isolated. I like being challenged. I like challenging other people. I like pushing our thought processes and our potential to the limit and beyond. And it's hard to do that online. It's hard to do that even with this podcast. How can I push you to the limit and beyond? It's so much nicer to meet with people where you can talk about deeper subjects in a deeper way. Not everyone's like that. You can't talk about some deep subject with some people. But when you make friends and you can actually discuss the deeper topics, it really stretches your mind. That's what I'm all about, stretching your mind. Because if I can stretch your mind, I can help you keep that mind open so that you can step into your power. This will help you be firm in your decisions and actions so that you can create the life you want. Always take steps to grow and evolve. You are powerful beyond measure. And above all, this is something I absolutely know to be true about you. And I really mean this. You are amazing.